I'm not ready, I whispered to myself as I stood outside courtroom 4B. Fingers trembling around the letter Micah had written me last night. I could hear voices behind the thick wooden door. Voices debating my future, his future, our life together, like we were a case file, not a family. My legs didn't want to move, but they had to, because the next time that door opened, my son would be asked to choose between the woman who gave him life and the one who gave him everything else. 17 years earlier, I hadn't known this day would come. I'd only known the sound that led me to him. It was a frigid January evening in Eugene. The streets were wet. Mist clung to the corners of old brick buildings like faded memory, and I had just finished grading a stack of essays. I remember thinking how quiet the hallway was, too quiet for a Thursday in my building. Then I heard it, faint, almost too faint, a sound like a whimper caught between shivering breaths. I followed it instinctively. There, nestled in the shadow beside the emergency stairwell, was a woven basket. Not a baby carrier, not a diaper bag, just a plain, worn basket wrapped in an old coat, damp at the edges from snow melt. My heart started pounding before my brain could catch up. I crouched down slowly. That's when I saw him. He was tiny, barely a few days old, wrapped in a hospital swaddle, his cheeks blotchy and wet with tears. His lips moved, but no sound came out anymore, just air and desperation. Someone had left him there, hoping he'd be found, hoping he wouldn't die alone. There was a folded piece of paper, stuffed awkwardly beside him. I still remember the handwriting. Shaky, rushed. Just 5 words. Please take care of him. I called 911, held the baby to my chest while we waited. I didn't know it yet, but I was already making room in my heart. At the hospital, they ran all the necessary checks. No missing child reports. No ID. No witnesses. No one came forward. The nurses called him Baby January. I called him mine in silence. They told me the state would assign a temporary guardian, but something in me couldn't let go. I filled out the paperwork before they even asked. I told the caseworker my intentions. I wasn't married. I didn't own a house. I didn't have much money, but I had a name I wanted to give him, Micah, and a love I hadn't known was still inside me until I saw his fingers curl around mine. The system made me wait. Home visits, psychological assessments, financial disclosures. They asked if I was prepared to give up my life for this child. I wanted to ask them, what life do you think I was living before him? Micah came home with me that March. He didn't cry the first night, just stared at the ceiling like he was listening for a voice that never came. I rocked him until the sun came up, whispered stories about stars and second chances. I was 31. He was barely 3 weeks old. And somehow we saved each other. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment above an old bookstore. The walls were thin. The windows leaked in winter. But there was laughter and songs, and the smell of cocoa and peanut butter on tired Tuesday nights. I clipped coupons, took extra tutoring jobs, sold my dad's old guitar to buy Micah's first crib. No family offered to help. Most didn't understand why a single woman with no husband, no plan, and no experience would take in a child left in a stairwell. But they didn't hear that cry. They didn't feel what I felt when I held him. For 17 winters, it was just us, a teacher and a boy who loved to draw. We didn't have a fireplace, but he'd paint one on cardboard and lean it against the wall. We didn't have vacations, but we had a map where he'd pin postcards from the library. Every year on January 12th, I'd whisper, "This is the day I met you." He never asked about his real mother, maybe because he didn't need to, maybe because he already knew who she was. And now someone else had come forward. A woman in heels and pearls with legal documents and blood tests and the power to undo 17 years in 17 minutes. Outside that courtroom door, I closed my eyes and breathed in as deep as I could. I had raised him with everything I had. I had held his fevered body through night sweats, stitched every Halloween costume by hand, cried behind the steering wheel the first time he said he hated me, and I would do it all again. But what if love wasn't enough? The first time Micah called me Mama, he was barely one. We were sitting on the threadbare rug in our living room, building a tower out of alphabet blocks. I don't even think he understood the word. He just looked up, touched my face with a jelly-smeared hand, and said it like it had always belonged to me. Mama. I went to the bathroom, closed the door, and cried into a hand towel until my chest ached. Not because I was sad, but because, for the first time in my life, someone had chosen me without hesitation. Raising Micah wasn't easy. There were nights when I held him upright for hours while he coughed through winter colds, his little chest rattling like a tired engine. Mornings when I left him crying at daycare so I could make it to my classroom by 7:30 sharp. Days when he'd fall asleep in the corner of my tiny office after school while I graded papers by lamplight. I was tired, always, but not once did I regret it. We had our own rhythms. Tuesday night was grilled cheese and tomato soup. Saturday morning meant library time. Micah loved sitting cross-legged in the children's corner, sketching animals from picture books. He'd whisper made-up stories while drawing with crayon-stained fingers, characters born from color and breath. At 6, he won the elementary school's art contest with a picture of a dragon reading a bedtime story to a scared little knight. I still have it, taped to the inside of my closet door. Money was tight. I drove a rusted Toyota that stalled on hills and only had heat when the radio didn't work. We clipped coupons, bought secondhand coats, and made birthday cakes from box mixes. But Micah never complained. Not once. He wore his hand-me-downs with pride, and when other kids at school teased him, he'd just shrug and say, "It's okay. My mom says Real knights don't need shiny armor." I never knew where he got that resilience, maybe from the part of me I didn't realize was still fighting too. I was honest with him, always. I told him he was adopted when he was 8, not because he asked, but because he deserved the truth. We were sitting on the park bench near our apartment, watching the ducks gather under the bridge. I told him he was left at my doorstep like a mystery I was meant to solve. I told him his birth mother couldn't care for him, but that didn't mean he wasn't loved. And then I told him what mattered most, that from the second I saw him, he became my entire world. He didn't say anything right away, just reached over, squeezed my hand, and said, "I still choose you." When Micah turned 10, he started spending more time in the attic. I'd go up there and find him covered in charcoal dust, surrounded by sketchbooks. His work changed, less whimsical, more human. Faces of people he saw on the bus, strangers in cafes, a self-portrait with his eyes shut, lips pressed tight. He was growing. So was the silence. But it was never cold silence, just the kind that comes from a boy turning inward, carving a space for his own mind. High school came like a tide. Taller shoes, deeper questions, tougher mornings. He fell in love with oil paint, fell out with friends, won scholarships, lost sleep. He told me one night, over microwaved leftovers, that he wanted to go to art school in Portland, that he wanted to live in a city that made him feel like the future was big and loud and full of color. I smiled and told him he was already a masterpiece in motion. But inside, I felt the quiet ache only mothers understand, the one where love means letting go. 17 winters passed like brushstrokes, blurred, layered, beautiful in the way only time can paint. Every year, on the anniversary of the day I found him, we had a tradition. Cocoa, candlelight. I'd retell the story of how a baby's cry changed my life in a hallway filled with shadows. He never interrupted, never rolled his eyes, just listened. Every time, until this year. This January he came home late, said he had to stay after school, didn't finish his cocoa, didn't light the candle. When I reminded him, he just nodded, then went to bed. No story, no smile. The next morning, I found a note on the kitchen table in his handwriting. "I love you. Please don't hate me for wanting to know where I came from." I stood there in my bathrobe, reading those words until the ink blurred. Something had shifted, and even though I'd always told him the door to his past was his to open, I never thought it would open without me. She arrived on a Tuesday. It was raining again. Oregon never seems to run out of gray, and I had just come home from work, arms full of groceries, when I saw the car, a sleek black sedan parked just slightly crooked in front of our building, windows tinted, engine still purring. I thought maybe it belonged to someone visiting the landlord, or a new neighbor, but then the door opened and she stepped out. She was striking, not in a loud way, but in that curated, careful kind of way. Tall, auburn hair pulled into a sleek chignon, heels too expensive for this part of town, and a deep red coat cinched perfectly at the waist. Her eyes scanned the building like she had seen it before in a dream, and then settled on me. She smiled. I didn't. Sarah Donnelly? Her voice was low, steady, the kind that didn't ask permission to speak. I set the grocery bag down slowly. Yes. I'm Tara Whitfield. She didn't offer her hand, just let the name hang between us like smoke. I believe you've been raising my son. I can't describe what that moment did to my body. It wasn't panic. It wasn't anger. It was something colder, something ancestral maybe, like every cell in me had turned toward Micah without even moving. I didn't answer, just picked up the bag and walked inside. She followed. I didn't invite her in. She stepped inside anyway. We sat at the kitchen table. The room felt too small for her presence, like she took up space even when she didn't move. She placed a file on the table, sleek black folder, gold initials stamped on the corner. TW Legal Group. Of course she had lawyers. Of course this wasn't just a visit. It never was. She began with the kind of line that sounds polite but means war. First, I want to thank you for what you've done. I'm sure raising Micah wasn't easy. I didn't respond. She continued, but I believe it's time he reconnected with where he truly came from, with his history, his bloodline. Where were you 17 years ago? I asked. My voice came out soft, not angry, like I was asking the weather why it rained. I was 18, addicted, homeless, scared. Her face didn't twitch. I made a decision that saved his life, and now that I'm better, I want a second chance to be part of it. You didn't leave a phone number or a name, just a note asking someone to clean up the mess. She leaned forward, elbows barely brushing the wood. And you did. You cleaned it up beautifully, but he's still mine. No, I said he isn't. Not anymore. That was when she played her trump card. She slid a sheet of paper across the table. DNA test. Positive match. I didn't need to read it. The way she said, mine, had already told me everything. She left not long after. Said she would give Micah time. Said she'd already spoken to him. That he'd reached out a few weeks ago, quietly. That he hadn't told me because he was afraid it would hurt. He was right. After she left, I went into Micah's room. It was empty, but his scent still lingered. Paint, cedarwood, the faint trace of shampoo he always forgot to put the cap on. I sat on his bed and picked up one of his sketchbooks. The latest page showed two women facing each other, their faces made of mirror fragments. One was all sharp lines, the other blurred, unfinished. In the corner, he had written one word, divide. I didn't cry that night. I couldn't. I just lay awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sunrise to tell me what kind of mother I still was. The days that followed blurred. Micah came home less. When he did, he was quiet. He wasn't cruel, just cautious. Like he didn't know how to fit me and her into the same sentence. She wants to take me to the coast next weekend, he said once, pouring cereal into a chipped bowl. She used to go there as a kid. Thought I might like it. I didn't ask him not to go. I just nodded and wiped down the counter again. It was already clean. Another evening, he brought home an old photograph. Tara at 20 holding a guitar, sitting on a beach towel with wild eyes and sunburned cheeks. I have her nose, he said, more to himself than to me. I just smiled. What I wanted to say was, no, you don't. You have your own. Then came the worst part. The dinner. She invited me. Some twisted idea of closure or balance. I don't know. She booked a restaurant downtown. Candlelit. Intimate. The kind of place where the silverware is heavier than the food. I almost didn't go. But Micah wanted me to. Please, Mom. Just once. So I went. I wore the blue dress Micah gave me last Christmas. He held my hand as we entered. She was already seated, wearing that red coat like a flag. We smiled. We clinked glasses. We spoke about his college applications, his art scholarship. But beneath every sentence was a question no one said aloud. Who do you belong to? Micah watched us, both like he was trying to read a script written in two dialects. After dessert, he excused himself. Just like that, we were alone. Tara looked at me and said, "You know he's going to want more." "I know," I said. "And eventually he'll choose." "I already did," I replied. 17 years ago. She didn't have a comeback. Just looked down at her untouched wine. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because motherhood isn't biology. It's standing in the cold at 3 a.m. with a sick child who won't stop vomiting. It's sacrificing vacations for braces and dreams for rent. It's watching him walk away and letting him. Even when it breaks you. The summons came on a Thursday. It arrived in a plain manila envelope, no different than the dozens of school memos and grading rubrics I carried home every week. But the moment I opened it, my hand stopped working. Inside, a petition for custody review, filed by Tara Whitfield. Her lawyers were requesting formal evaluation of the child's best interests. They used his full name, Micah Whitfield, like it was theirs to touch. I stood in the kitchen, the paper trembling between my fingers, and felt the floor tilt ever so slightly. My knees didn't buckle. My voice didn't rise. I just stopped, like the film reel in my head had torn mid-frame. I thought I had prepared for this, for the day she would come back, but I hadn't prepared for the law to listen. That night, I waited for Micah to come home. He was late. Again. When he walked in, his hair was damp from the rain, and his cheeks were flushed like he'd been walking fast. I showed him the envelope without a word. He read it slowly, the lines around his mouth tightening with each sentence. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red. "I didn't know she'd do this," he whispered. "You reached out to her," I said. "You opened the door." "I just wanted answers." "And now?" My voice cracked. "I don't know." He backed away like my words had weight. "I didn't ask for this, Mom. I never wanted to choose." But that's what court was, a room where people pretend choices are made with logic, not grief. The weeks that followed felt like some cruel rehearsal. Phone calls, depositions, home evaluations. I cleaned the apartment like it was being graded, replaced old light bulbs, bought a new rug for the entryway. I even framed his childhood drawings and hung them in the hallway, hoping they'd whisper something to the judge about love and time. Micah was quieter, not angry, just torn. I caught him staring at old photos. He stopped leaving his sketchbooks around. One afternoon, I found him shredding a letter in the kitchen sink, the words bleeding into the water. I didn't ask what it said. Then came the worst day of all. The morning of the hearing, the city was wrapped in fog so thick it felt like the world itself didn't want to be seen. I wore a navy blouse and the pearl earrings my mother left me. I don't know why. Maybe I thought if I looked the part, calm, capable, maternal, it would matter. Tara arrived with 2 attorneys, both men, both polished, both trained in the art of erasing 17 years with a smile. I sat alone, no counsel, just me and a folder of receipts, report cards, and photo prints with dates scribbled in the corners. Micah entered last. The courtroom turned when he walked in. He wore a button-down shirt I had ironed the night before. His shoulders were tense. He didn't look at either of us. The judge, a woman in her 60s with tired eyes, read the case summary. She referred to Micah as the minor. She called Tara the biological mother. She called me the guardian. No one said Mom. Tara's lawyers spoke first. They painted a story of redemption, of a young woman who made a mistake, worked to fix it, and now wanted to rebuild her family. They said Micah had the right to his bloodline, his heritage, his legacy. One of them even suggested that staying with me could limit his potential opportunities for cultural identity and financial support. I almost laughed. Almost. Then it was my turn. I stood up. My voice didn't shake. Not even once. I'm not here to argue biology, I said. I'm not here to diminish her recovery. I'm here because 17 years ago, I found a baby in a hallway. No name. No plan. Just a note that said, "Please take care of him." And I did. I told them about his first steps, his fear of thunder, his obsession with jelly beans and dinosaurs. I told them about the chicken pox at age 5, the broken wrist at 10, the failed math test that made him cry when he was 13. But more than that, I said, I told him stories when he couldn't sleep. I let him hate me when he was angry. I forgave him before he ever apologized. I taught him how to tie a tie, how to fail with dignity, how to say, "I'm scared," without shame. I didn't give him life, but I gave him a childhood. I looked at the judge, then at Micah. His eyes were glistening. Isn't that what makes a mother? Silence followed. A long, aching silence. The kind that doesn't belong in a courtroom, but in a church pew or a hospital room. The judge didn't make a ruling that day. Said she needed time. Said it was complex. But as we stood outside the building, the rain finally stopped. Micah looked at me. Really looked. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I don't want to lose either of you, but if I have to choose, I choose the one who stayed." And just like that, the fear cracked. Not gone, but broken enough to let light in. After the court hearing, something shifted in the air between us. Not all at once. Not like a clean break, but like fog slowly burning off the edge of a lake, revealing the shape of the water underneath. Micah didn't move back and right away. He said he needed time to figure out what it all meant. I understood. At least I tried to. Tara didn't fight the decision. Not openly. The judge ruled for joint contact, with me as the primary legal guardian, but by then Micah had already made up his mind. He stayed, not because I asked, not because I begged, but because, in the end, love wasn't about origin. It was about presence. The first time he came home for dinner after the ruling, I almost didn't recognize the boy who walked through the door. Taller, leaner, older somehow. He hugged me in the hallway, longer than usual, and when I pulled back, there were tears in both our eyes. But we didn't talk about them. We just ate. He told me Tara had offered to help pay for college, that she wanted to visit once a month, maybe less, that she understood now being a mother isn't just about blood. It's about what happens between the birthdays, the scraped knees, the silent car rides after hard days. It's about the 1,000 invisible things no one applauds you for. She said she's proud of you, he told me once, while helping me hang laundry, for raising me. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and handed him another towel. Life settled back into a rhythm, quieter this time. He applied to that art school in Portland and got in. Full scholarship. He showed me the acceptance letter on a rainy Tuesday, and I cried so hard I had to sit down on the kitchen floor. He sat with me, just like he used to when he was little, crawling into my lap and resting his head under my chin. The day he left for college, the apartment felt too big. I walked into his room and stood in the doorway for a long time. The walls were bare, the bookshelf half empty, but the scent of his cologne still lingered on the curtains. I didn't cry that time. I smiled, because I knew he was ready, and so was I. Every week he sends me a new sketch. Sometimes it's of the city skyline, sometimes just the view from his dorm window. Once he sent me a drawing of 2 women, one with auburn hair, one with tired eyes and a warm smile, standing side by side under a tree. On the back he wrote, "I come from both of you, but I belong with the one who stayed." I framed it. Now I keep it on my nightstand. A few months later, on my birthday, he surprised me by showing up unannounced. He brought takeout, a bottle of cheap red wine, and a worn shoebox wrapped in brown paper. "This is from her," he said, setting the box on the table. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Tara at 19 holding a guitar. Tara pregnant, standing in front of a shelter. Hospital bracelets. The original note she had left with Micah. And beneath it all, a journal. "She wanted me to know the truth," he said. "And she wanted you to have it too." I read it slowly over the next few weeks. Her handwriting was small and looping, full of crossed out lines and ink smudges. She wrote about the drugs, the men, the fear, but also the dreams. The quiet wish that someone, somewhere, would raise her child with the love she didn't know how to give. And when she wrote about me, she called me the miracle stranger. I didn't feel like a miracle, but maybe in some version of her story I was. Years passed. Micah became an illustrator. His work got published in children's books. He painted murals in community centers. He taught art to foster kids on weekends. He said it made him feel like he was giving something back, like he could turn pieces of his story into colors that healed. Tara passed away when Micah was 25. Liver failure. He was with her in the hospital, held her hand, told her it was okay to rest. Then he called me. "Come get me," he said, his voice cracking. I did. We didn't talk much on the drive home. But when we pulled into the driveway, he looked at me and said, "You're still the only place I feel safe." I didn't need anything more. Now, when people ask if I have children, I say yes. I have a son. He's an artist. He teaches. He heals. He loves deeply. They don't ask about DNA. They don't ask about courts or papers or bloodlines. And even if they did, I'd just smile and say, "He's mine." Because love doesn't begin in a womb. It begins in the choosing. And every single day, I choose him again. If there's one thing this journey has taught me, it's that motherhood is not defined by biology. It's defined by presence. By the nights you sit beside a sick child's bed, whispering lullabies into the dark. By the mornings you wake up early to pack lunch, iron shirts, and remind someone to believe in themselves even when the world doesn't. People used to tell me I was brave for taking in a baby I didn't birth. But the truth is, I didn't rescue him. He rescued me. He gave my life meaning in ways I never expected. He made me a mother before I ever called myself one. And every struggle, every doubt, every quiet ache was worth it just to hear him say, "You're home." Not everyone will understand. Some will say blood is everything. But I know better now. Love is louder. Love is Messier. Love is showing up again and again when no one's watching. I didn't need a shared last name to be his mother. I just needed to stay.